She arrived at the mining settlement with 11 cents and a dress that had not been cleaned in 2 weeks. The street was mud and timber and the smell of men who worked underground. A row of buildings leaned into each other like they were tired. At the far end, a mule stood hitched to nothing in particular. She stopped in front of the boarding house. A man was sweeping the porch, not lazily, but with attention, working the bristles into the corners. He had not looked up yet. She looked at the 11 cents in her palm. Then she closed her hand. He looked up. She said, "I can cook and clean, sir." He set the broom against the railing. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he is trying to place. Not unkindly, but without any hurry to decide. The morning was cold. Her breath showed. "You have experience?" She kept her hands at her sides. "Yes, sir." He looked at the street behind her briefly, then back. "Where?" She told him. "A household before. A good one, with a real kitchen and a wood stove and a woman who had taught her to put up preserves and render lard and bake bread that held together. The household had broken up after the mistress died and she had not waited to see what came next. She did not say more than that and he did not ask. He picked the broom back up and finished the corner he had been working on, and she stood on the street and waited and did not fidget because fidgeting was something she had trained out of herself a long time ago when she understood that stillness reads as competence whether or not you feel it. He opened the door and held it. "Your name is?" "Jane Porter, sir. The woman who cooked here left 2 weeks ago. Meals at 6 o'clock and noon. Your room is at the back." She walked in. He showed her the room, a narrow bed, a hook on the wall, a window that faced the alley. Then he set some coins on the sill and looked at the window instead of at her. "General store is 2 buildings down. Ask for the woman there. Tell her you need a working dress. She keeps some ready-made on a peg near the back." He paused. "Can't have you serving meals like that." She looked at the coins. She picked them up. "I'll be back before supper," she said. He nodded and left her to it. The woman at the general store had the look of someone who had sized up a great many people in a great many conditions and did not find any of it remarkable. She looked at Jane for a moment, then moved to the back of the store without being asked. She lifted a plain dress from the peg, dark gray, sturdy cotton, cut for work rather than occasion, and held it up briefly. "You're at the boarding house," the woman said. It was not a question. "Yes, ma'am." The woman added a heavy apron from the hook beside it and set both on the counter. She said the gray would hold up through the winter and that she had a second one in brown if she came back when she had more coin. She said it the way a person says something they have said many times before, not unkindly, just with the efficiency of someone who understood what was actually needed and saw no reason to dress it up. Jane paid what was asked. She had a few coins left over. She folded the dress and apron over her arm and walked back up the street. The boarding house had 8 men staying in it, miners mostly, and one who called himself a surveyor, though his instruments rarely left his room. They ate in shifts. They were not unkind to her, but they watched her the way men watch something new in a room they have occupied a long time, with a weariness that had nothing to do with her personally and everything to do with the fact of her. Daniel Harper ran the house without waste. He kept accounts in a ledger he left open on the desk, which she took to mean he had nothing to hide. He gave instructions once and did not repeat them, which suited her because she did not need things repeated. She was up before him the first morning. The fire was already lit and the coffee was on, and she was cutting salt pork at the block when she heard his boots on the stairs. A particular sound, unhurried, 2 steps from the bottom heavier than the rest, because that was where the tread gave slightly. She did not turn around. She heard him stop in the doorway, take in the room, the fire, the coffee, the smell of the meat going in the pan, and then heard him pull out the chair and sit down, and neither of them said anything, and that was fine. The men noticed within 2 days the biscuits were the thing that did it, made the way her mother had taught her, with lard worked cold into the flour until it was right, and they came out with a layered quality that the men recognized as something they had not had in some time. One of them pushed back from the table and looked at the ceiling as though doing a calculation. "Better than my mother's." 2 others turned on him immediately. She kept her back to all of them and worked the pan and did not smile until she was facing the wall. And by the time she turned around, her expression was ordinary again. Daniel was watching from the far end of the table. When she met his eye, he looked back down at his cup and she looked away. And that was the first thing that passed between them that neither of them had intended. It was a week before he asked her anything that was not about the house. He came in from the stable yard. It was nearly dark, the temperature dropping fast the way it did in that country. And she was at the stove. He crossed to the basin and washed his hands and dried them and hung the cloth back on the nail. Without turning around, he said, "You have family to write to." It was not quite a question. She moved the spoon in the pot. Her parents had gone the previous spring, she said. Fever. Her father first and then her mother inside the same week. As though her mother had decided there was no point continuing without him. She said it evenly, the way you say a thing when the sharpest edge of it has worn down from being handled. Not because it hurts less, but because you have made a kind of peace with carrying it. He stood with his back to her a moment longer than necessary. She understood that he was giving her the courtesy of not watching her face. He turned and took his coat from the hook and folded it over the back of a chair and sat down. A long moment passed. The fire, the pot, the last gray light going out of the window. "I'm sorry for it," he said. She moved the spoon and said she was grateful for that, and there was a particular texture to the silence after. Not uncomfortable, but full. The way a room feels when something real has been said in it and no one has tried to cover it over. She did not reach for more words, and neither did he. And she found she was glad of that. More glad than she could have explained. And she did not try. The days arranged themselves into a shape she recognized. She knew how to live inside a house that needed tending. Knew the rhythm of it, the particular satisfaction of a swept floor and a restocked larder and a fire that caught on the first try. The mountains were visible from the kitchen window. Snow on the peaks already. And it was not yet deep into the season. She watched them in the mornings while the coffee came up and let herself think about nothing in particular, which was its own kind of rest. The first real rest she had had since the spring. One evening in October, he came in from the stable yard moving carefully, favoring his left side. Something wrenched in his shoulder from the look of it, the way he held his arm close and did not swing it. He did not say anything about it. He crossed to the basin and washed his hands. And came to the table and sat down and opened the ledger. As though nothing was different. Except that he turned the pages with his right hand. Only in his jaw was set in the particular way of a man managing discomfort. He has decided not to mention. She watched this for a moment from the stove. Then she took the liniment from the shelf and set it on the table beside him without comment. He looked at it. He looked at her. She had already turned back to the stove. He was quiet for a moment. Then she heard the sound of the bottle being unstoppered. "Thank you," he said. She moved the pot on the hook and said it was on the shelf if he needed it again. And that was all either of them said about it. But the kitchen felt different after. Warmer somehow or closer. And when she glanced at the window a little later the reflection showed her own face. And she looked away from it quickly and kept her hands busy. And was grateful again for the noise of the pot. His coffee cup moved over the weeks from the far end of the table to the near end. Not all at once. Gradually. The way a current moves something without announcing it. She noticed and said nothing. She began setting it there when she laid the table in the mornings. And he sat down without comment. The ledger work he used to do in the office he began bringing to the kitchen table in the evenings. She would be mending or working her own accounts. And he would sit across from her with the ledger open,